So, Zing, let's dive in. All right, I'm asked to ask you two questions, so we talked about it. And I'm very interested to know what motivated you to make this film.
Yeah, so I think there was a multitude of reasons, and one, as we were discussing outside, it was inspired by true events, and I think that's representative a lot of times, not just this moment, but anything that happens, in the world around us, whether it's intimately or on foreign shores. It gets picked up by a news cycle, and these lives are thrust into the public consciousness. And they exist for us as long as the media wishes to tell that story, and it captivates the community or the world, and then just as quickly as that happens, it disappears. Those lives, they continue, and that was really important to think about as an anchor to this. And what about all these lives? And that reminded me of my family and the characters that these people are reflecting in a community that's often thrust into the public consciousness and then just left to figure itself out and to form their own enclaves and islands. And on the other hand as well, this is a story that I think you can imagine being another kind of story. One that was really focused on the action or the thrills and diminished the humanity that is exhibited in all these characters. These are four lost souls. To me, they're children. It's a challenge to the idea of what masculinity is in characters in cinema, but in real life, especially through the generations of Long and Tay. And for it to be more tender and to humanize, we also talked about that before too, but Long is a captive and the three men are fugitives, and we don't often get to humanize incarcerated people, especially understand that these people don't exist in a vacuum. They don't choose to make these decisions. It's circumstantial and it's environmental. We have to think about that as well. So all these components were really what compelled me to make this version.
The film is really deep. Many times I saw the shot was very intimate at the characters' faces, right? And we used to say, we Asian Americans, or we don't express our emotion, but your film capture the emotion so deeply through their faces, and you capture the face so intimately. You mentioned about consciousness, but there's a lot of unconsciousness in this film where Mr. Long had the flashbacks many times about his capture when he was in the political prison, and when he was having discord with his family, and then the conversation with his wife before thinking that he was probably maybe killed. There are a lot of unconsciousness, trauma, intergenerational trauma, all four souls experiencing trauma, disconnection, and a lot of pain. You can also see so much volatility, where people with trauma have a hard time expressing their emotions. So some of for them, the incarcerated was like the violence is the expression of their emotions. So tell me, what are the highlights of each character that you want to bring forward in this movie? And then after that question, I'm going to turn it to the audience so they can ask questions.
First, thank you for such a poignant observation. Maybe people know your background, but I just wanted to have this opportunity. If you could also explain your background and why we wanted to have this conversation today as well, because I think, cinematically it's important, but as people.
So maybe I recap in Vietnamese just a quick. Tại vì tôi làm trong cái nghề về tâm lý trị liệu, thì có rất nhiều người Việt Nam bệnh nhân mà ở cái thế hệ đầu tiên, first generation, cũng trường hợp như là chú Long ở đây, và những người phụ nữ vân vân, thì và có cả những người tôi làm việc mà đã từng ở trong tù ở tại Hoa Kỳ nè, ra thành ra là những cái vấn đề mà post traumatic stress syndrome, vấn đề mà có những flashback và những cái vấn đề mà gia đình không có hiểu được những cái cảm xúc và những cái anger outburst của những quý vị này. Thì trong cái phim này thực sự portray rất là bởi vì hồi nãy tôi có dùng cái chữ mà tôi resonate với cái phim này là authenticity, tức là nó rất là thật và nó phải nói là không có gì gọi là Hollywood mà nó rất là a lot of humanity và rất là thật trong cái phim này. Là tôi rất là touch khi mà tôi xem cái phim này và nhìn thấy cái sự thật trong cuộc sống của nhiều cái thế hệ Việt Nam qua nhiều cái trauma, những cái chấn động trong cuộc đời riêng của mình cũng như là trong cái lịch sử ở Việt Nam. So I just said that in Vietnamese, but I think hopefully you all capture. I was saying I worked in the field of mental health and with patients with post-traumatic stress disorders, and the first generation Vietnamese that was captured or was in political prison. I also worked with incarcerated young people. So the trauma that portrayed here was just so authentic to me. The facial expressions and the volatility and the hypervigilance. I can see when he missed alone, he feels threatened that he was about to be killed. His fingers moving, and you capture every single details, and it was just amazing to me. So let's share with the audience what the highlights of these characters that you want to bring forward to this movie.
Absolutely. I guess we'll start with Long because he's the central character, but also everything that you were observing. With him, to me, all four of them exist on a scale or a spectrum of self-containment, whether there is a physical or metaphorical prison that you exist in or an island, but also the shortcomings of assimilation to another place. And for Long, he's lost so many versions of what he would call a home, whether that's physical, whether that's spiritual, whether that's within his family. And within each iteration of that, I think there's a break of trust within himself and within the people around him, so much so that he withdraws, even within the heart of his own community, he withdraws into his own place and has trouble even trusting people that surround him. The details of his expressions and his movement, it also leans into this idea of what a prison is. And to me, Long is also in a physical prison, that his mind is sharp and he's understood so many different versions of his life and experiences that he's gone through, but his body doesn't move as fast as his mind may do. And so you have these moments where, the inflections of, emotion or a reaction can only exist in the smallest physical movement. On top of that, his lack of they're speaking two languages in this film and he only understands one. And I always think about, even for me, growing up around my family, where there's several different dialects of Chinese happening. There's Cantonese, there's Hakka, there's others, and not being able to understand what everybody's saying, and you suddenly become very hyper aware of your surrounding, and you notice these details, and with one sense being diminished, another one heightens. And for Long, his observation and his perception is something that heightens. So we as the viewer and as the camera would also want to be like that. And then I'll go to Aden, because Aden is somebody who's, to me, the antithesis of what Long Ma represents, but also going through the same thing. For him, I wanted to make his ethnicity and his background ambiguous, intentionally for two reasons. One, for his character is, symbolically, he's somebody who's tried to assimilate and tried to be seen as equal to the Western community and the Western nation around him. He wants to have the privileges that they have, but he can never, because he's not them. But he's gone so far into that journey that he's forgotten everything that he used to be. And obviously, it's not something that you process, and without, with that displacement comes another kind of volatility. And the other thing also as well is that, in cinema, anyone who's North African or Middle Eastern or Arab, is often tarnished with a diminished kind of role. And that was not what I wanted for Aden. And Tay is somebody who's, I feel like, is the center point and the anchor of the film. He is somebody who exhibits duality. He's somebody who has gone through a lot of trauma himself, but I think also there's an arrested development within his emotional intelligence, his naivety. He still wants to, you know, he hasn't had the love that he thinks he deserves, or he doesn't believe he deserves love. But at the same time, he's trying to seek to please everybody around him in order to substitute for that. And Eddie is someone who's on his journey towards Aden. You know, he reminds me of me when I was young, my generation, the generation after us. You know, as time goes on and you lose more family members and you lose more community around you, you forget where you've come from, and he's starting to become as invisible as Aden.
It is amazing how the psychology that you brought into this. I watched the film the first time, and I was like, how did he come up with all of this, right? Because Aden was so gifted too, the way he moved from one emotion to the next, and then sometimes he could be really antisocial, but then you can see his empathy with his remorse for what happened. It is amazing, he just so natural.
Yeah.
It's so authentic.
No, I'm glad you noticed that too, because the other thing as well with, you know, we want to talk about incarcerated people and the characters like them three. Someone like Aden, who is exceptionally gifted, you can tell he's intelligent. If he was given the opportunity that someone else might have had and the privilege, the skill set that he has, he could have led him on a completely different path. And that's something that isn't always afforded to people. You know, it's not like he could have maneuvered himself into a place where that would, you know, make his life flourish. And the other thing I wanted to point out was Eddie also represents, you know, again, when we think of gangs, when we think of, you know, Orange County gangs or the Chinese triads or the mafia, like, it's glamorized in a way that you don't understand. Sometimes it's just a way to protect a community. That's what it was started for. Or it's a way to try and find some kind of family yourself. And it doesn't always mean that you look how you might perceive them to be. You know, Eddie's a run. But, you know, quote unquote, he was still in a gang.
Thank you. I'm going to turn the conversation to the audience, and for anyone who wants to share your thought, that this is some reflection on your part about your family or any interaction with family member, just like how we're presenting here with them.
We have a roving microphone right there.
So raise your hand so we can bring the microphone to you. We have a hand up here. Microphone?
First recording.
First of all, thank you so much for producing this movie, and for all the actors for portraying the part of the Vietnamese community that we don't always talk about. I myself work in, you know, the mental health space, but I have brothers who have been incarcerated. So many times, you know, our families celebrate us because we have a degree in the medical field, but they don't celebrate our brothers who go through the challenges. So just want to say thank you for humanizing my brother. That going in and out of 20 years of jail is a struggle. Some of us have access to healthcare. Some of us have access to mental health professionals that treat celebrities. But my brother didn't. So I always tell people that the difference between me and my brother is not a degree. It's my access, like you said, to healthcare. It's my ability to find family and to acknowledge who my families are. I'm very proud of my family's journey, and still proud of my brother. The joke always has been growing up was when someone says, "Where's Jonathan?" We said he went to the Ivy League. He went to Yale, because that's how we say in Vietnamese for jail. But thank you so much for allowing me to share this.
Thank you so much.
Anyone else? Reflection. As you see.
Congratulations, that was a riveting, beautiful, compelling film, and I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. How close for you was Dustin's Tay, to the real life character?
I think there was an intention that two things. One, wanted to respect the lives of those that are being portrayed, but two, to not be bound by the singularity of an individual, and so that, you know, as we were talking, each character, the way I've described it is each character is like a vessel that, yes, inspired by someone that's real, but that they could hopefully become so much more, so that you can see yourself or fragments of yourself, family, through each individual character, or maybe just different parts of your life through them. So the intention was to not be as accurate, but in spirit, yes, you know, in terms of what they went through and what they might have thought, to at least exhibit that.
Yeah, it was beautiful. I mean, like, Dustin's a close friend, but watching his character and watching all the other characters, it rang true with the guys I grew up with in New York Chinese gangs. So for me, it was, I mean, it was an awesome job.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you.
Anyone else?
Yes, congratulations. I'm very excited because of the, we're on the cusp of 50th anniversary of the fall of Saigon coming next in 2025. So what greater way to make a noise but to have the Vietnamese community flourishing by making movies like this and continuing to share the power of the Vietnamese and the culture. I was so impressed with the film, especially because some of the performances you got out of some of the characters, obviously Dustin, was really profound and heartwarming. So I'm watching the story throughout, and I didn't realize until halfway through this isn't a comedy, this isn't an action adventure. This is, at the heart of it, it's a father and son story, and I was so taken, especially in the end. Here's Long's character. He's searching for a family this whole time, but we're not seeing that. In fact, he's the lead, and he really doesn't say much, but his expressions are priceless. And then to see Dustin's character longing to have having a father. So well done for capturing this all on film and creating such a compelling story. I really enjoyed it, both my wife and I. Thank you so much.
I'm curious, any reflections on family experiences or on your own journey?
There's a hand in the middle. Okay, perfect. Coming to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for producing this movie. On the topic of family relations, like you were talking about, Eddie's character actually resonated very well with my own experience. Not with me per se, but I have a younger brother, and Eddie's experience when he bursted out at Long's character, and when he went outside, he was talking to Dai. He said that ego and pride, it's something that can be that can lead to like a trap. It's something that can lead to it's like a poison, I guess you could say, that can like rip you up from within. And seeing my brother, he himself, like he struggles from having an ego. I don't really mean that in the sense of like, you know, like too much pride, like how like you said, like a bunch of the younger generation maybe has, but I guess Eddie's character reflected well within people who basically want to look for a community where they might not find otherwise outside in like a city where maybe they can't relate with anyone else. And yeah, just seeing Eddie's character, it really reminded me of my own brother, and that it struck a chord with me. But yeah, and then like something else that stood out to me was actually, I don't know if anybody else might have picked up on it, but or not picked up on it. Like it's just an observation on my end. But I really liked the scene where you zoomed in on the food after they came to the house, Linda's house, to make food. It felt releasing because it reminded me of my own experience. Like when I was sick, my mom, she would make me tea, or my dad would make me porridge. And it's after like, you know, you're like stressed out, after you've been hurting for a long time, and then, you know, like them showing that they care for you through their food. Because I know a lot of maybe Vietnamese parents, maybe a lot of Asian parents, they have a hard time saying the words "I love you," and they usually show that through their own actions. But for Long's character, I know someone else said that he was looking for a family, and maybe I projected my own feelings onto him, but it felt very releasing when there was there was the focus on the food making, and he said that he hasn't had a good meal in a while, and that it just brought up something within me. But thank you so much.
No, thank you for sharing that. And actually, there's a really good point that food is a love language, and it's also our history, and every family has a different recipe for the same dish, Yeah, my parents own a takeaway in the UK. I grew up in the back of it. Like you said, like many Asian families, wherever you're from, like they talk through. My parents talk through food. You know, they struggle to say terms of endearment or affection, but it was shown through the food we grew up in. And for me as well, you know, that was interesting growing up because this was some westernized version of our culture that my family were continuing to share with the community around us, our own recipes, so our own family stories, but it was putting food on our own table as well. So the relationship with food is something that, you know, I grew up with, and I'm glad that you noticed.
I'm glad you brought that up. The other things too, with trauma, the way people deal with it is to go back to the routine of everyday life. And, you know, younger generations that, you know, my parents never talked about the trauma they've been through, and they keep working, they keep going, they keep doing things, but perhaps that's how they can survive, because they're not ready to really connect back to that trauma. And you can see the routine keep going, and going back to the food, people feel relief.
Yeah.
Right? That's interesting. Anyone else have any questions or reflections?
Oh, back here.
Okay. We have 9 minutes left. Thank you.
Hello, I'll try to speak as quickly as possible. I have like a million thoughts, and I'm trying to narrow down to 2. Goodness gracious, loved that you chose noir as a way to tell your story. I'm curious about why you chose to use that genre specifically to tell the story. I thought the lighting was gorgeous and how you staged every scene was beautiful, and also the character studies were phenomenal. Yeah.
Okay, so several reasons why, but the first is that these are characters that, for whatever reason that they're going through, aren't free. They don't feel free. Legally, they may not be. Technically, they may not be free. So they exist in a purgatory, and that purgatory is the night and the shadows and the corners and the architecture of light that feels so sharp. You know, it's so decisive. Like that feeling that you might have of when you're not light. You know, when you're not like unburdened. And the intention was to keep them cloaked in some darkness, including Longmar, because Longmar is in prison just like they are, you know. And to keep them within confined spaces so they feel large or claustrophobic in these spaces, but at a certain point in the film, once their resources have run dry, once they're getting into a place of even more desperation that we open out to the world, you know, they have nowhere to escape but into the light, but that light is not gratifying. You know, we change to large wides where they feel now insignificant in the frame, now that they're in the exterior world. Until obviously we get to the end, and it's bookended by Longmar starting in his apartment at night, and then eventually for his character, the doors open and it's daylight, and he's able to move through these two worlds. So that was the intention of, I guess, why I wanted it to be some noir-like.
That's so awesome. Thank you. I also just wanted to add that, I forgot my thoughts. Maybe I just pass it on. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Maybe just one more.
Everybody pointing at you.
Hi, congratulations, and that was a beautiful and poignant and resonant film. I just wanted to know from the production point of view, what was, say, your favorite part, and what was a challenge, and what's next for you?
I think, I mean, it's funny, you know, sat next to a psychiatrist, psychologist, that you don't remember so quickly the things that was like the most challenging. But I'll start with the one that I enjoyed the most. Just even in the film and shooting, it was the sunflower seed game. You know, even from writing it to seeing it on set, just to see it in the film, it's this reprieve that happens. We're these three characters for a second just forget their environment and play a game that they've definitely played in different iterations across different generations, may have a different name, but they're also just bored and just passing the time, and you know, they all sit on the bed together, and it's really clearly the three different generations, three different philosophies, three different walks of life. And then also, you know, you start something and no one wants to be the one to kind of ruin it, you know, so they just keep going and going and going until eventually they win. So to me, that one's my favorite moment. It's the most tender in the film. And then the challenging, I don't know. I'm sure I know, but maybe I'm just trying not to think about it. Or maybe it was just that good, you know, we had such a great team. So. What's next? Well, I'd like to, you know, the writer's strike's over, so I'm able to resume writing and continue to explore subverting different themes or genres. I want to do a romantic mystery next, so see what that looks like, and we'll move on from there.
Anything else?
Thank you for telling that story. I thought it was really, really beautiful. I got choked up watching it. But what I was seeing from the four characters, you know, each of them just seemed very lonely, and I don't know if this was intentional, but it really, of course, for Lauman, Day, and Eddie, you know, they were seeking understanding, and it seemed, you know, even Aden was seeking like some form of to be understood, and that he was deeply, deeply, deeply lonely. Was that intentional for him to see, you know, to be seeking a sort of companionship, even though, you know, it was to an extent, you know, manipulative and trying to get out of that, just trying to get free and, you know, reach his goal, but at the same time, I felt like there was a deep loneliness within him. Is that intentional?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you feel that, and you know, I guess just like long in different ways, I would say to the actors, as you know, we were starting to prep, that for Long, you know, there's like a callus that's like inches, meters thick, that he doesn't want anyone to come in to see just how alone or how fragile he really is. And it's the same for Aden, you know, like each one have their own armor that's corrupted them in some way, or you know, that they've become codependent with, and Aden is definitely that. Like I said before, he's an intelligent person. If he had that opportunity somewhere else, he would have been a different person. And you know, his monologue, I think, is intentionally ambiguous. Whether you don't know, he's just that manipulative that he can perform to, you know, capture your heart and then to turn it off just like that. But to me, that was a moment where he saw Long Ma like a well, and that well can never speak back to anybody. He doesn't understand him, so he's going to confess his truth to this person. And so for me, he really showed that he was just a lost child reaching out for his own version of a family as well.
Hi, Director Singjay Lee, thank you so much for the gift to the world, helping us to have reflection for deeper understanding of our humanity and the complexity of our emotions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.